I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that the last thing I want is for Anthem to turn out to be bad. But if we take a step back and look at what's been happening with Anthem over the past few months, it's hard not to be a little concerned that something about this game just doesn't feel right. Most recently, we learned from an investigative article by Kotaku editor Jason Schreier that BioWare's fate is basically riding on Anthem's success, putting a lot of pressure on the development team. Should Anthem fail, it is safe to expect that BioWare will look very different in the not-so-distant future, much like other studios that signed a deal with the gaming industry's devil, EA. The article was also the first to report that Anthem would be delayed to 2019, which EA confirmed at a later time during a financial briefing. According to one source, the original fall 2018 release window was never realistic to begin with. Another source expressed how sentiment on Anthem's development status started out with, quote, "This game is screwed." And though that sentiment has shifted to something less negative over time, something that Kotaku quoted as "game development is really hard," that doesn't change the fact that this isn't the most encouraging of information. Something else that's been impeding Anthem's development is EA's insistence that BioWare use the Frostbite engine to make the game, an engine that was primarily created for action games and shooters and doesn't play well with open-world environments and RPG mechanics. Beyond that, after the backlash against games like Battlefront 2 and Destiny 2, anxiety at the studio is at an all-time high. Prior to this article, we also saw a number of key BioWare members leave the studio in the middle of Anthem's development, including studio head Aaron Flynn, who has since been replaced by Casey Hudson, who returned to the studio after his own departure from the company, Dragon Age 4 creative director Mike Laidlaw, and Anthem's lead animator Stephen Gilmore. But as if all that wasn't enough, BioWare suffered another major loss a few days ago, lead writer Drew Karpyshyn. If you're not familiar with that name, well, suffice to say that he's one of BioWare's most prominent figures, the unsung hero, responsible for many of the studio's phenomenal stories. He was one of the core game designers and the senior writer for Knights of the Old Republic. He was one of the lead writers and planners for Jade Empire. He was a writer for Baldur's Gate 2, and most notably, he was lead writer for Mass Effect 1 and 2. He wasn't involved in Mass Effect 3 though. In fact, on February 2012, shortly before the launch of the third game, he left BioWare to pursue his own ventures, namely writing novels. Many don't see it as a coincidence that the one game in the trilogy Drew wasn't involved in turned out to be the worst narratively, particularly where the ending was concerned. It's also worth noting that Drew had his own ideas for how the Mass Effect trilogy should have ended before those ideas were scrapped and replaced by the current controversial finale, which had very little consideration for the choices players made leading up to that point. Anyway, suffice to say that he's a big deal and one of the beating hearts of BioWare's storytelling prowess. After he left in February 2012, he did eventually return to BioWare over 3 years later on September 2015. Initially, he was assigned to post-release development for Star Wars The Old Republic, but he eventually started helping out with Anthem, and that gave people hope that the game would at least have a compelling narrative. But these hopes would be short-lived, as Drew Karpyshyn announced through his personal website just yesterday on March 9th, 2018, that he would once again be leaving BioWare. Here's what he wrote. Yes, it's true. As of Friday, March 2nd, I am no longer an employee of BioWare EA. Some of you might be thinking, wait, this sounds familiar. Yes, this is my second retirement from BioWare. Last time, I left to focus on my Chaosborn trilogy. This time, I'm leaving to pursue a number of other projects, including more original novels, an original sci-fi graphic novel I'm co-creating, and freelance gaming work. I know a lot of you are wondering why I'm doing this. For many people, working at BioWare would be their dream job, and they can't imagine anyone stepping away from it. But it was time for me to move on. Everyone who works at BioWare pours their heart and soul into the games they are making. It's creatively demanding and at times exhausting. In the past, I've managed to juggle outside projects with my work at BioWare, but it always took a toll, and there were always outside projects I had to pass on because they would represent a conflict of interest with BioWare or EA properties. So I made the decision to step back again and focus on my freelance work. But I'm not leaving games entirely. As of Monday, I'm I'm officially working with Fogbank Entertainment and Fox Next Games. I can't say a lot about what we're up to yet, but here's the official Fogbank Entertainment announcement. So Fox Next Games is basically a division of 21st Century Fox Holdings, now acquired by Disney, that launched a new studio in San Francisco called Fogbank Entertainment, and it consists of a small team of 20 industry veterans who'll be focusing on episodic narrative games. Essentially, Drew is retreating from big AAA game development environments like Bioware and pursuing something tighter and more personal while focusing on freelance work. The one thing that sticks out about his reasoning for leaving is the word exhausting. It kind of ties back to the Kotaku article detailing how much is riding on Anthem's success, how much pressure is on the developer's shoulders, and how low morale is at the studio. Drew wanting to get away from that kind of environment is certainly something that I don't hold against him. There are many other accounts of veteran game developers getting burned out by the relentless nature of game development, particularly the AAA landscape. I will say though, I do find the timing of his departure rather strange. It's not as if he's leaving Bioware after the completion of the project, he's leaving smack dab in the middle of it. With Anthem having been pushed back to Q1 of 2019, the game is still a year out, and this is a crucial time period during which game development kicks into full gear. So for a key developer, someone as prolific as Drew Karpyshyn no less, to leave so suddenly during such a crucial time, it's just strange, and it raises concerns for how Anthem is actually shaping up to be behind the scenes. You may recall that something similar happened with Mass Effect Andromeda. You may recall that during crucial times in its development, we saw key members like Casey Hudson up and leave with very little explanation, an ominous premonition that foreshadowed the game's doomed fate. Drew Karpyshyn's departure also harkens back to when Bungie veteran and prominent writer Joe Staten had written a vertical slice of the story for Destiny that eventually got scrapped and culminated in the game's development undergoing a full reboot. This was then followed by Joe Staten leaving the studio in terms that one wouldn't call amicable. What I'm trying to say is that we have been here before. We have seen how key devs leaving in the middle of game development has signaled bad tidings, so it's understandable that people might perceive recent departures of key Anthem devs similarly. Now, I'm not saying that the circumstances behind Drew's departure are the same as Casey Hudson's or Joe Staten's. All we know for sure is that Drew apparently felt exhausted and therefore decided to step back to focus on freelance work, and he seems adamant that's all there is to it, stating, quote, "Please don't email me asking for more information about why I'm leaving. There is no dirty laundry, I'm just waiting to air." I'm sure people will read more into this statement than there really is, but there's not much I can do about that. I know some people are going to dwell on the past, but that's not my style. But regardless of what Drew's departure might signify for the state of Anthem's development and the behind-the-scenes going-ons in BioWare and EA, the real tragedy is that his talent won't be around for the long journey that awaits Anthem. One of the biggest reasons so many people were excited about Anthem was Drew Karpyshyn's involvement. His track record kind of speaks for itself. Every game he's touched turned into storytelling gold, so his talent being a part of Anthem was one big reason to remain hopeful for this game. But with him gone, one has to wonder whether Anthem's story and narrative will hold water and live up to the standards that were established by games BioWare made during its prime, especially by the time Anthem starts releasing expansions and sequels that expand upon the established lore. After all, almost every time that BioWare made a game without Drew, the narrative lost a certain level of finesse, as evidenced by Mass Effect 3's controversial ending, and of course Mass Effect Andromeda as a whole. I don't know, fingers crossed that I'm just being paranoid and overly pessimistic. I do want Anthem to succeed. I do want it to live up to expectations that its gameplay trailer set back in E3 2017. But there's just been a lot of turbulence surrounding this project, so it would be wise to approach optimism for this game with caution. These are just one man's thoughts and opinions anyway. I'd love to hear what your take is on all of this in the comments below. With that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy my content, consider supporting me on Patreon. It is completely optional, but donating even as little as $1 a month will go a long way in helping this channel grow. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out!